Hi guys, Brexit is a bit of a hot potato for the Labour Party. They have recently changed their rhetoric around it from avoiding talking about it completely to calling it a Tory Brexit. Now this implies that if Labour were in power, they would have Brexit operate in some other way. Now the Shadow Women and Equality Secretary Anneliese Dodds was interviewed by Lewis Goodall about this, and she talked about how her party would fix Brexit in some way. Have a listen to this.
Something a lot of businesses are talking about, of course, at the moment, and something that is our relationship with the European Union. Would you accept that our current relationship with the European Union, would you accept that Brexit is one of the reasons why we've got extremely sluggish growth at the moment, or no growth at all?
Well, I think one of the problems we have is that actually the way the Conservatives have approached Brexit is stopping it from having any chance of being a success. For example, they're not doing what lots of businesses say to me British businesses need. They need a veterinary agreement. What would that do? That would mean we could cut out a lot of those checks on food and this kind of thing that are really clogging.
Okay, let's park for a moment where she said that it's the Tories holding back Brexit from being a success. Brexit will not be a success. Okay, it's a disaster. You can't turn a disaster into a success. But she mentioned also a veterinary agreement, a bespoke veterinary agreement. This, of course, would be an agreement between the UK and the EU. There doesn't exist one, of course, so we have to look at something else that does exist. And this is a veterinary agreement between Switzerland and the EU. So I would imagine the UK would be trying to get something similar. It says here, the veterinary agreement governs the control of certain animal diseases and their notification, trade between Switzerland and the EU in living animals, their sperm, eggs, cells and embryos, and animal products, those being milk and dairy products, meat and meat products, the import of these animals and products from third countries, and animal breeding. There is a joint committee set up to discuss these issues and implement them. And at the end it says here, decisions taken by the EU in the area of animal health and food safety affect Swiss legislation through the veterinary agreement. Switzerland therefore seeks to represent its position to the EU when legislation is being drafted and as scientific developments occur. It does this by participating in working groups and in the standing committee. It goes on to say that obviously Switzerland has no voting rights. Switzerland can ask the EU, please implement this, consider implementing that, and then the EU will decide. And the UK could be in a similar position if it has an agreement similar to this. The EU could change rules, and the UK would have to implement those rules in its legislation. Once again, this is not the same as being a member of the EU. If you're a member of the EU, then you are at the table making these decisions as well. This is not being a rule maker, it's a rule taker. It's better than what exists at the moment, but it's still you not being in control.
Up our ports, creating big issues.
What about the single market? And one easy way of doing it is to say, look, if a Labour government is just going to go for growth, you and I both know that one of the things that could drive growth, one of the big components that you could do overnight, we just talked about how hard it is to drive growth, how long-term it is. Something you could do more or less overnight, you'd have to negotiate it, but pretty quickly, is accession to the single market. If politics isn't important and the economics and we need growth, why isn't Labour talking about rejoining the single market?
Okay, before we get to her answer, it's not overnight. It takes a lot more than what he's saying here to join the single market. There are two ways into the single market: EU membership or being a member of the European Free Trade Association. Now, at the moment, the members of the the European Free Trade Association are Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Now, Norway has a population of about 5.5 million people. Switzerland has a population of about 8 million people. Norway has pretty much said that they would not welcome the UK as a member. And you can sort of understand, these are small countries. Can you imagine the UK joining this? Who would be in control? So they would lose whatever power they have pretty much. So they don't want, it seems, the UK to join the European Free Trade Association. So the alternative is becoming a member of the EU. But nobody's talking about that at the moment. Now, you have to become a member of the EU or to be a member of the European Free Trade Association in order to get access to the single market. Okay, that's how it works. And nobody's talking about that.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. So I think actually there are measures that we could, well, because there are measures we could take right now that other countries that aren't part of the single market, that aren't part of the EU, have managed to achieve. So if I can just finish, for example, with a veterinary agreement, as I said, there's lots of countries outside the EU, outside the single market that have got those kinds of agreements. They mean that goods can move much more freely.
Sure. Yes, in some ways, you can have these agreements with the EU and goods can move more freely. But as we saw with the Swiss agreement, you're not in control. You're a rule taker. What's the point? Please, somebody explain to me, what's the advantage of being a rule taker and not a rule maker? Now, countries like Switzerland and the ones of the European Free Trade Association, they have decided we don't want to be members of the EU. Okay. But they are paying for access to the single market. Does the UK want to pay for that? Like at the moment, the only way they can access the single market in reality is becoming a member of the EU. I don't believe that it's possible for the UK to sign some sort of agreement where they have access to the single market, but they're not a member of the the EFTA, or they're a member of the EU. I don't see that working.
That kind of practical stuff is what our government should be focused on when it comes to our relationship with the EU. They haven't been, and we could change that very, very quickly.
Sure thing.
No, you can't change it quickly. Like, you can try and sign up to some sort of agreement, like the veterinary one, but it takes time, and it has to be implemented in UK law. So you have to get that through Parliament as well. So you need to be in government. Yes, you need to be in government to get these things done. But you also have to push this through Parliament. I don't know if you can.
As you and I both know, a veterinary agreement covering a pretty small percentage of the economy, i.e. agriculture, wouldn't shift the dial very much in terms of growth. Take something like manufacturing. It takes something like manufacturing, huge proportion of the economy, services, huge proportion of the economy, all suffering at the moment as a result of lack of single market access. You and I both know that is a huge drag on the economy. So if the Labour Party just cares about growth, why not revisit that question? It's about politics, about your internal politics, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's about what we can deliver for our country and do so speedily in order to secure our growth for the future. And actually, I wouldn't downplay that kind of an agreement at all. I mean, it amounts for about 80% of the checks currently taking place on UK goods. So it is pretty significant, the fact that we don't seem to have a government that can actually secure that kind of a deal, nor does it seem to be able to secure a deal on data either. Again, something lots of other countries have with the EU, something that would clear up many of the problems that businesses have when they raise this with me. But, that's just one of the reasons why we've got these issues in our country. It really has been that lack of a proper plan. The fact that our Conservative government is still doing things now that are actually holding back our economic growth. Why have we got Rishi?
Okay, they are holding back economic growth. They are, but these things are not going to... Look, the guy, Lewis Goodall, talked about, well, this is just a small section of the economy. To a certain extent, it's not just agriculture, because it covers food as well. Any product that contains any animal product needs to be dealt with here. It's mainly agriculture, but other aspects as well. But once again, we get back to the same problem. Do you want to be in control? Do you want to be writing the rules, or do you want to be taking the rules? Do you want to be at the negotiating table deciding what the rules are, or do you just want to be accepting these rules? I think it's going to be difficult to sell this to the public. I think it would actually be easier to sell EU membership. sell it as it is. It's much more beneficial. We are deciding the rules. We're not just taking them. But once again, this talk about joining the single market overnight is not true. It's pie in the sky. You need to join the single market. To join the single market, you need to be a member of the European Union or a member of the European Free Trade Association. Can't get away from that. And I understand that the Labour Party don't want to piss off people who voted for Brexit, people who are sitting on the fence, people who don't like Brexit but don't want to rejoin the EU. And I understand that sometimes you can't be direct with people and completely open with them because they don't understand how these things work. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.